All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we are taking on something absolutely wild. We're going to translate a profoundly dense, deeply layered academic text that somehow perfectly bridges ancient Eastern theology, quantum physics, and systemic economics. I know, it sounds like a massive undertaking, but once we map out the blueprints we've extracted directly from the source, you'll see exactly how these huge concepts fit together flawlessly. Here is our game plan for today. We'll be hitting 5 key areas: linear versus circular thinking, the science of cycles, polarity and flowing circulation, harmony and recursive return, and finally, the great upward spiral. Let's get to it. Part 1, linear versus circular thinking. First things first, we've got to contrast two fundamentally different ways of looking at the universe, because this is the absolute foundation for everything that follows. Think about how differently the East and West approach reality. The traditional Western mindset is super reductionist. It wants to break everything apart, looking for the smallest independent building blocks, and treats creation like a single isolated straight-line event. But flip over to the Eastern viewpoint and it's a completely different ballgame. It is totally holistic. It relies on correlative thinking, which basically means it looks at the big picture and defines every single part by how it functions within an endless, interconnected cycle. Now, for the longest time, that circular view was just brushed off as unscientific. But the text highlights a massive turning point where Western linear logic literally hit a brick wall. Brilliant minds like Bertrand Russell and Kurt Gödel came along and proved, mathematically mind you, that no logical system can ever exist without exceptions. The source material goes so far as to call Gödel's incompleteness theorems a flat-out declaration of bankruptcy for purely linear philosophy. It essentially proved that if a universe loops and references itself, you just can't map it with a straight line. And just like that, the doors swung wide open for circular logic to be recognized as completely mathematically and scientifically rigorous. Which brings us to part 2, the science of cycles. And this is where things get really cool, because modern science is actually catching up to these ancient paradigms. If you look at modern complexity science, the absolute bedrock concept is self-organization. It's this mechanism where living things spontaneously create new order using positive and negative feedback loops. We are totally ditching the old idea that the universe is just some rigid machine. And here's the kicker. The text notes that self-organization is literally just a modern rebrand of the ancient Eastern concept of eternal circularity. It's the exact same mechanism, just wearing a modern physics and computing off it. So, the crucial point here is that ancient concepts like yin-yang and the 5 phases aren't deficient or unscientific at all. Using Thomas Kuhn's theory of scientific revolutions, we can see they just belong to a totally different paradigm. While traditional Western science is subtractive, stripping things down to bare atoms, Eastern science is additive. It's relational. It watches how things correlate and circulate together. And guess what? That is exactly how complexity science operates today. Moving right along to part 3, polarity and flowing circulation. Now that we know the cycle is scientifically valid, let's break down the actual mechanics of how it operates in nature. The first big piece of the puzzle is polarity. In Daeson thought, this is called yum-yang hapdak, which translates to the union of yin-yang virtue. And here is the beautiful part. It isn't about destroying your opposite. It's the harmony of difference. Think of water and fire. Totally opposite, right? But they actually need each other to exist and can combine to create a mutually beneficial union. And when you map this ancient theological concept onto the modern economy, the text aligns it directly with libertarianism. It's all about free movement and finding an equilibrium between totally different independent forces. Next up is flowing circulation, and you can picture this exactly like a fountain. First, water gathers down at the base, like winter. Then, fueled by heat or fire, it shoots vigorously upward, bursting out like the first sprout of spring. It spreads out horizontally in every direction, and finally falls straight back down without ever really ending. In Daeson thought, this continuous, flowing state of perfection is known as dotong jinyang, and in the economic world, this perfectly mirrors communitarianism. It's the idea of resources circulating continuously to sustain the entire community, never just sitting stagnant. All right, part 4, harmony and recursive return. We've got the polarity and the flow from nature, but who is actually managing all of this? This is where humanity steps in. Humanity steps right into the very center of the cycle to act as the ultimate mediator. Daesun thought introduces this really fascinating concept here called Haewon Sangsang. It means the resolution of grievances for mutual benefit.
Basically, if the cycle gets jammed up because of imbalance or resentment, it has to be cleared out. And this isn't just some airy spiritual notion. It maps flawlessly onto the economic principle of utilitarianism. It is all about pursuing public benefit and making sure the cycle operates fairly for the greatest common good. But listen, any dynamic system also needs outside correction, which brings us to the idea of return or recursion. In Dasein thought, they call this Sinanjohua, or the harmony of divine and human. It's the idea that humanity uses its unique spot in the universe to fix the imbalances between heaven and earth. In modern complexity science, we just call this a feedback loop. And in economics, it's social contractarianism. It's the rules and agreements we make and constantly feed back into the system to keep everything running smoothly. So, we have this perfectly balanced, circulating system. But staring at this framework, you might be scratching your head right about now. If everything is just one giant, endless loop, summer, autumn, winter, spring, wash, rinse, repeat, how in the world does society or the economy ever actually grow? Aren't we just running on a cosmic treadmill?
Well, that perfectly sets up our final section, Part 5, the Great Upward Spiral. And this is honestly the most mind-bending concept of the whole text. Here is the absolute game changer. This cycle, it is not a flat circle. It is a dynamic, three-dimensional spiral. Think about the way a galaxy spins, or the double helix of your DNA, or even the movement of atoms. They rotate, sure, but they are always moving forward. Economically speaking, this is huge. Traditional economics is absolutely obsessed with the idea of diminishing returns. But a spiral cycle? It assumes increasing returns. With every single rotation of the cosmic seasons, primacy, flourishing, harvest, and correctness, you get massive growth and expanding production. And that ultimate, expanding upward spiral is exactly what the word Dasein actually means, the Great Circulation.
Let's tie this whole shebang together into one unified map. The ancient concept of polarity, or Im-Young-Hub-Duk, is exactly what complexity science calls initial conditions and economics calls libertarianism. Flowing circulation, or Dotong-Jinyang, is coevolution and communitarianism. Neutralization, that maps to Heiwan-Song-Sang, scientific fluctuation and utilitarianism. Return is Sininjoa, our modern feedback loops and the social contract. And the spiral itself? That is Dasein, self-organization, and the absolute holy grail of economics, increasing returns. It is literally a unified theory of everything, and it's been hiding in plain sight for millennia.
Ultimately, unpacking this massive cyclic blueprint forces us to ask a pretty heavy question about our own role in all of this. Are we just passively riding on some merry-go-round doomed to repeat the past forever? Or, standing at the very center of the cycle, are we the crucial feedback loop actively driving the great upward spiral of the cosmos? It really challenges us to look way beyond our linear limits and totally reimagine how we build our sciences, our economies, and our societies. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep your eyes open to the cycles all around you, and I will catch you next time.